You use 10% of your brain. You've heard it 1,000 times. It's wrong, and here's the part that should bother you. Nobody, not one single person, can tell you where that number actually came from. Not scientists, not historians, not the movies that built entire plots around it. A neurologist at Johns Hopkins named Barry Gordon has spent years chasing this claim, and his verdict on it is, in his own words, almost laughable. Because the truth is the exact opposite. You use all of your brain, constantly. Even right now, just sitting here listening to this sentence, all of it is switched on. So how does a completely made-up statistic survive for over 100 years, repeated by teachers, by movie stars, by motivational speakers who all sound so sure of themselves? Stick around, because the real story is stranger than the myth, and it starts with one misquoted sentence. To find the source, you have to go back further than you'd expect. Not to a brain scientist at all. To a philosopher writing in 1907. His name was William James, and he's considered one of the founders of American psychology. In an essay called The Energies of Men, James wrote that most people use only a small part of their possible mental and physical resources. Read that again slowly. He never said 10%. He never said anything about brain tissue at all. He was talking about willpower, about how rarely people push themselves to their real limit. Nice idea. Completely unrelated to how many of your brain cells are switched on. So if James never gave a number, where did 10% specifically come from? That part is almost funnier than the myth. In 1929, an advertisement in the World Almanac claimed that scientists and psychologists agree we use about 10% of our brain power. No study, no named scientist. It was an ad. Around the same time, a psychologist named Carl Lashley was damaging small parts of rats' brains and watching them relearn tasks anyway. His actual findings were narrow and technical. But popular writers grabbed the loosest possible reading, that a rat could lose a chunk of brain and still function, and stretched it into proof that most of the brain must be spare. Lashley never claimed that. His rats, one assumes, would have found the whole thing as baffling as you do. But the real damage came in 1936. That year, the explorer and radio broadcaster Lowell Thomas wrote the introduction to one of the best-selling books ever printed, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. In that introduction, Thomas credited the 10% figure directly to William James. James, who never said it. That one wrong sentence, printed in a book that sold tens of millions of copies, is very likely the exact moment a vague idea about untapped potential hardened into a false statistic that felt like established science. And that's not even the part that should really bother you. Because here's the question that actually settles it. Forget who started the myth. How do we know for a fact that it's wrong? The answer sits inside a hospital scanning room. Using tools like fMRI and PET scans, which track blood flow and energy use across the whole brain in real time, researchers can watch a living human brain at work. And when they look, there's no dark, silent 90% waiting to be switched on. There's activity everywhere, all the time. Doctors have also learned this the hard way for over a century through strokes and brain injuries. Damage a small area tied to speech, and speech changes. Damage a different area tied to movement, or memory, or vision, and that exact ability suffers too. If 90% of your brain were truly just sitting there idle, there would be huge regions you could lose completely and never notice. That has never once happened. Every mapped region does a job, and losing it costs you something. Think of your brain like a city that never sleeps, not as a slogan. Literally. In a real city, even at 3 in the morning, when the streets are dead empty, the power grid isn't off. Streetlights stay lit. Refrigerators keep humming. Traffic signals keep cycling red, yellow, green for cars that aren't even there. The city burns most of its energy just staying ready, whether anyone's awake to see it or not. Rush hour, everybody driving at once, barely moves the needle on top of that constant background hum. Your brain runs the same way. The baseline hum, the parts working right now while you just sit and listen, is the vast majority of the activity. Concentrating hard on a tough problem barely adds anything on top. And that brings us to the twist that even people who already know the 10% thing is false have usually never heard. Reveal. In the late 1990s, a neuroscientist named Marcus Reichla at Washington University in St. Louis was running a fairly ordinary brain scan experiment. Measure the brain during a hard mental task, then measure it again at rest and compare. The rest was supposed to be the boring part. The control. Except the resting brain refused to actually rest. Reichla found that a brain doing nothing in particular was still burning roughly 95% of the energy it used during the single hardest task in the experiment. 95%. Sitting still, staring at nothing. Your brain never really clocks out. Reichla had stumbled onto an entire hidden network, now called the default mode network, that switches on the moment you stop paying attention to the outside world. He named it in 2001, and it has become one of the most studied systems in all of neuroscience. Now, here's where the myth gets sneaky, because there is one grain of real science tangled up in it. For about half a century, textbooks confidently taught that only 10% of the cells in your brain were neurons, the cells that fire signals and do the thinking, while the other 90% were quieter support cells called glia. A real 10% sitting right there. Then better counting methods arrived. In 2016, a major review confirmed the old 10-to-1 ratio was flat wrong. Your brain has roughly equal numbers of neurons and glial cells, closer to 1-to-1. So even the tidy little fact that might have propped up the myth turned out to be another number nobody had actually checked. Propter relevance. So why does thinking hard still leave you exhausted if your brain was basically already at full power before you started? Here's where it connects to you today. Your brain is about 2% of your body weight, but it burns roughly 20% of the calories you eat in a day, 2% of the mass, 1/5 of the fuel. That ratio alone should have killed the 10% myth decades ago, because evolution does not build and maintain an organ that expensive just to leave most of it switched off. It survives because nearly every part of it is doing something right now, whether you're solving a problem or scrolling your phone. That heavy, foggy feeling after a long exam or a brutal day at work isn't 90% of your brain finally waking up. It's an organ already running near its limit, being pushed a little further, on top of a bill it was paying every second of your life anyway. Even now, sitting still and listening, your brain is drawing close to that same 20% share. That's not effort. That's just the resting rate. So the next time somebody tells you they wish they could unlock the other 90% of their brain, you'll know the real answer. There's nothing left to unlock. It's already on. It's been on this whole time. And the true story, a philosopher's misquoted sentence turning into a century of pop culture, is honestly a better twist than the myth ever managed. If a single misquoted line can fool the entire world for 100 years, wait until you see what a straight-up publicity stunt did to the truth about who really invented the light bulb. Subscribe, and keep finding out how your own world and your own mind actually work.